Hello, everyone. I'm Plastics News Conference Director Joe Pryweller. Welcome to the Plastics Caps and Closures Conference, organized by Plastics News. This conference will focus on new developments, trends, and issues involving you, our audience of plastics caps and closures producers. We're certain you'll enjoy the variety of speakers and panel discussions over the next few days. This afternoon's panel discussion will look at the future of sustainability and brand initiatives. With us is a distinguished panel of experts representing end users, processors, and consultants, with a common thread that all have either worked at brand owner companies or work with them now in a consulting capacity. The session moderator is Roger Zellner, president and owner of Rogue Zebra Consulting and Coaching. Roger will introduce our session panelists: Paula Appendini of Mars Wrigley, Sandeep Kulkarni of Cool Earth Solutions, and Allison Lynn of Westfall Technique. Let me now turn the discussion over to Roger Zellner. Roger, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you, Joe. And it's a pleasure to be back speaking at the Caps and Closures Conference again. As I said last year, Caps and Closures is where the magic happens when packaging, especially with consumers' engagement of packaging, and consequently, it becomes a high priority for brand owners. And speaking of brand owners, we are fortunate today to have three panelists who have several years of experience, either working for or with brand owners in packaging. Among the four of us, we have a few decades in that realm. Now, let me quickly introduce our panelists before we go to each one to have them share a few words about themselves and their companies. As you can see, we have Allison Lynn, who is Vice President of Procurement and Sustainability with Westfall Technique, where she works with their supply partners and customers to drive value and sustainability across their integrated supply solutions, from design, mold making, to manufacturing. Allison spent time at the Coca-Cola Company, Starbucks, and P&G, where she led sustainable packaging strategies across both fibers and plastics. She has her MBA from Duke University. Now next is Paula Appendini at Mars Wrigley, where she leads a packaging team focused on delivering the next generation of packaging technologies to provide consumers with sustainable products and relevant experience. Prior to Mars Wrigley, she worked with PepsiCo and Kraft Foods. She holds a PhD in food science from Cornell University. Now third is Dr. Sandeep Kulkarni, who is the founder and president of Cool Earth Solutions, a technical consulting and business development company. He is also part of an environmental solutions platform, Ubuntu. Sandeep has worked at International Paper, Nina Paper, Georgia Pacific, and most recently PepsiCo. He serves as an adjunct professor at the Packaging School connected with Clemson University, as well as North Carolina State University. Now, Allison, please give us more perspective about Westfall Technique and sustainability.
Thank you, Roger. Really excited to be back here at the Caps and Closures Conference. Definitely one of my favorite conferences to be at. So I proud to represent Westfall Technic. We are a custom injection molder working with a lot of the brand owners today. And we're very proud to be members of the Ellen MacArthur Global Commitment for a New Plastics Economy. And we also recently joined the APR Demand Champion list. So really excited about some of the innovations that we can bring to help drive demand for PCR. On my next slide, so as Roger mentioned, I've been a brand owner for multiple years. And for the past decade, I've really struggled to qualify PCR with some of the supply chain that was in place. I was continually getting pushback from my suppliers on reasons why PCR couldn't be included. And I was really excited when I saw Westfall embrace this challenge of using a very technical approach to qualify very aggressive levels of PCR. So I decided to jump from the brand owner side over to the supplier side. And now with our integrated solution, we're working with many of these brand owners to first design parts that enable sustainability following the APR guidelines. We also do our own prototyping and tool making so that we can test the materials. And when we build the mold and design the mold, we account for the different properties of sustainable materials that our customers are looking for. And lastly, when we move to the processing and molding component, we're able to optimize the production process for the different types of sustainable materials we are using. With some of our partnerships, we're able to bring some really interesting sustainability solutions to the caps and closure space. So we are a partner with UCL, one of the premier global designers for closures. We have a linerless one-piece closure for the juice, dairy, and beverage category that can remove the non-recyclable foil material. We also have one-piece closures that move from two-piece polypropylene to a one-piece HDPE material that's more recyclable. We also do have designs for tethered closures. I think there's a lot of discussion on tethered closures going on in the caps and closures space. And we do try to move some of our customers from polypropylene to HDPE so that it's a more recyclable material and improve the recyclability, and also enables more recycled content since it's HDPE. A new partnership we just launched last week, there's a new partnership with a company called Polycarbon, where we're actually developing recycled content for medical and life science components. And probably what I'm most proud of is that we've been able to achieve up to 100% recycled levels for recycled content levels in beauty, laundry, home, and food and beverage closures. With that, I will turn it over to Paula.
Thank you so much, Allison. And I want to thank the committee for Caps and Closures to inviting me. And I look forward to our discussion later on. But for now, I wanted to talk a little bit about Mars Wrigley and our vision in sustainability as well as our work. So if you're not familiar with Mars Wrigley, we do a lot of confections, and our packaging portfolio is very vast, all the way from flexible materials to rigids. We use caps and closures, et cetera, et cetera. So the first thing I'll say is not one solution meets all, because we have this wide variety of packages. But I want to say that we recognize that packaging is essential for consumer goods, but we also recognize that that poses real challenges. It's not always recyclable. And even when it is recyclable, it's not always collected or recycled, which means it ends up as debris in land and in oceans. So we don't want that, of course. And at Mars, we take our responsibility for sustainable packaging very seriously. And we strive to design packaging that meets performance requirements while reducing the amount of material, and by eliminating the use of materials that cannot be recycled easily. To ensure we're doing our part and that we are accountable, we have joined the Ellen MacArthur commitment, which includes a vision where plastics never become waste. Back in 2019, we launched a set of new ambitious circular packaging plans, which includes what you're seeing in your screen. So first of all, 100% plastic packaging that is reusable, recyclable, or compostable by 2025. We also are committing to advancing reuse models where they are relevant and they make business sense, as well as incorporating recycled content where it's not in conflict with food safety regulations. In addition, we're partnering with advanced recycling systems and partners to providing guidance to consumers in all our major markets, because we are a global company. So that's my introduction. Hopefully we'll have more chance to go in depth, but that's it for me. I'll pass it on to Sandeep Kulkarni.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Paula, and also thank you, Roger, for inviting me to this conference, and Joe for bringing me into this. This is my first time speaking at the Caps and Closures conference, but hopefully it will not be the only time. I think I'm looking forward to being back next year as well. Joe, Roger did a great job of introducing me, and I think the only things I want to touch on in this introductory slide is basically my experience at PepsiCo. I was very heavily involved in the recycling and the recycled content in bottles as well as closures while I was at PepsiCo. And really, in terms of what the APR defines as recyclability. So using those guidelines, I was able to qualify several materials, particularly in terms of bottle recycled material. I've also been very heavily involved with key sustainability organizations, the Sustainable Packaging Coalition. Both Paula and Allison mentioned about the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. PepsiCo, of course, is a major part of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. I was heavily involved with some of those activities. And of course, as I mentioned, the Association for Plastic Recyclers. Also, in parallel, I've been very actively involved on the strategy side of the business. So really looking at corporate sustainability strategies, helping develop new strategies. Also looking at life cycle assessment, because anytime you start talking about sustainability, really the metrics are really important. I think looking at life cycle impacts of introducing recycled materials in any packaging, I think is a key to assessing sustainability. And also during my consulting career, I've been involved with several brand owners, which I'll show on the next slide, to help really develop a baseline for their packaging and currently where they are in terms of the recyclability of their packaging. So for instance, I worked with companies like Starbucks and Nestle and even Amazon to really do a baseline in terms of their current plastic packaging and helping identify areas of the low-hanging fruits and opportunities to transition to more recyclable packaging, but also to introduce more recycled content in their packaging. So I think as we get into the panel discussion, hopefully we'll be able to touch on some of those topics. So looking forward to a great discussion. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Roger.
Okay, well, thank you, Sandeep. And as you can see up on this slide, I've had quite a few years and been blessed to have worked at companies that have powerful brands where packaging really makes a difference. And across these, the theme of sustainability has been strong since my early days as one of the original packaging developers on Oscar Mayer Lunchables, to the redesign of the iconic Kraft salad dressing bottle, and more recently working with leadership teams to develop corporate strategies for packaging and sustainability. And currently I've been consulting in the space of packaging sustainability with private equity and across the industry. And one of my true passions is helping coach scientists and engineers to have more success in their careers. Now, as we go to the next slide, really a setup for our Q&A. Some key points, you've heard these mentioned already. One of the most exciting developments is that many major companies have made commitments to the 100% recyclable, recoverable, and compostable goals with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation by 2025. And containers have been highlighted much more than caps and closures. And APR has really been advocating, the caps on, which currently, we can have some discussion around this, is the best route for recycling of those. And as Allison mentioned, and Sandeep, recycled content is an opportunity. So now as we get into Q&A, I will ask the questions and direct to someone initially, and the others can pitch in. And as we're bringing everyone on screen here, Paula, if I may start with you, what current sustainability initiatives are center stage at your organization and why?
Sure. So I think in my introduction, I mentioned some of the areas and commitments we're working on. So I'll try to expand a little bit on those. So when it comes to technical and material design, we are testing some pack formats to move more easily through the recycle stream. So we are designing for recycle within, what we know today, which is the current infrastructure through the different regions. We are also identifying opportunities to use less material overall. We have a wide range of seasonal packages. So, those sometimes can be heavy on the material side. So we're working a lot to, really design for recyclability and remove a lot of the packaging. We are investigating circular schemes. I mentioned reusable packaging before. I believe that's a very big area and a huge opportunity, not only because, it's the minimum packaging you can have by reusing it, but it also represents a growth opportunity, right? If you can nail the right business model. And lastly, working to develop effective compostable packaging. And we're going with the stage of the technology as well as where is it appropriate to look into that. But I was starting to say that we also partner beyond just what we're designing for recyclability with partners beyond that, like recycling infrastructure and consumer engagement. At the end of the day, we can design the best amazing packaging that meets, recyclability, but if we don't have the right infrastructure where to put it and where to recycle it, or if the consumer is not going to dispose properly of it, then the whole purpose of what us as brand owners are doing gets defeated. So from the recycle infrastructure end, we are improving mechanical recycling so more of our current packs can be managed through the technology. We're exploring the opportunity that maybe chemical or other new recycled technologies can address to expand recyclability opportunities and for more challenging pack types. As I mentioned, we have a very broad portfolio. Some things can be highly recyclable, but some things we need to work a lot to make that happen. And then also exploring composting at scale. From a consumer engagement standpoint, we are exploring the use of on-pack messaging to educate consumers. We are participating in local consumer education schemes to enable consumers recycle more of their plastic waste. And lastly, we're engaging with peers and retailers like the Consumer Goods Forum to address the collective challenges of improving recycling infrastructure and also supporting consumers to enable them to do the right thing. So those are some of the things we're working on.
Okay. Well, thanks. Allison or Sandeep, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think I echo a lot of this work that Paula is doing. That's a lot of the key initiatives we're seeing across the brand owners that we work with. There's a lot of focus on qualifying higher levels of recycled content. So really excited that we can help some of our customers get up to 100% recycled content and launch those in market. Specifically right now, since a lot of consumers have started shopping more online, we also, through our partnership with UCL, have a e-commerce closures or different range of e-commerce closures to make sure that there's not waste throughout the supply chain. I've gotten a lot of shipments where there's broken closures and liquid all over the package, and no one wants that. So we're really focusing on how do we improve those e-commerce closures, and we have some solutions for brand owners to improve the sustainability, reducing waste through the supply chain and the e-commerce supply chain.
Okay. Well, thank you. So the next question, Allison, I'll come back to you, given that dialogue. What new developments may impact recycling or recycled content of plastics, especially caps and closures?
Yeah. Well, Roger, you mentioned the How to Recycle label, and I love that initiative in encouraging consumers to leave the cap on when recycling the bottle. I think that makes it really easy for the consumers to understand what they should do. We haven't seen the requirement so far until the closures move to the U.S., although there has been a couple of bills being proposed. I know in Europe that's being required and moving forward, but at least in the U.S. we haven't seen those. And the Caps On initiative with the How to Recycle label, I think, addresses the problem by getting the closures through the recycling stream with the bottle. We're also working with many brands to move from polypropylene to HDPE closures, especially if it's on an HDPE container. So the whole container can be recyclable and more easily recyclable in the recycling stream. This also gives us the opportunity to qualify higher levels of recycled content because there is more available recycled HDPE in the market. So by moving from the polypropylene and HDPE containers when appropriate, that enables us to improve the recycling stream as well as qualify more recycled content.
Okay. Thank you. Sandeep or Paula, anything to add to that?
I think one thing I'll add to that is increasing the demand or creating a demand for the recycled material, particularly in caps and closures. I think Allison made a great point about leaving the caps on. But I think at the end of the day, also, there has to be a pull through from the brand owner. And I think there was a mention about the Demand Champions program from the APR. So having something like that in place where you're actually having brand owners who are asking for that material and to put it back into their caps and closures, at the end of the day, I think that's going to really drive more and more recycling of caps. And the other piece, I think, just from here, talking to my former colleagues at PepsiCo, I hear that sometimes the caps actually pop off at the MRF when the bottles get compressed. So being able to collect some of those broken caps and so on, and being able to get those into the recycling stream, I think would also help generate higher amounts of recycled plastics, particularly for caps and closures. So I think just those 2 points I just wanted to bring up.
Okay. Well, thank you. So Sandeep, back to you since you brought that up. What do you see as the biggest challenges then around the whole recycling system, especially for caps and closures, and the biggest opportunities? You mentioned a couple already.
Yeah, so specific to caps and closures, I think traditionally the challenge has been the weight of the caps or the percentage of the cap relative to the rest of the bottle. So for most brand owners, it was not economical necessarily to source recycled content for caps and closures. But I think that's slowly changing. Of course, on the opposite side, as you know, as there's been a push to reduce the bottle weight, there's also been a simultaneous push to make the caps smaller and lighter weight, which sort of adversely affects the yield and collection and so on. So there's sort of a threshold there. But I think overall, like I said, I think the biggest challenge has been really creating the demand, getting more brand owners to incorporate increased amount of recycled content into the caps and closures. But given all the drive with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and some of the other the global initiatives of companies like Coca-Cola and PepsiCo and Mars Wrigley, I think that's definitely going to drive this initiative towards incorporating more recycled content in caps and closures. I hope that answered your question. If there's anything you want me to add to that, happy to do so.
Well, actually, I think I'll bounce back to Allison and Paula. As he mentioned brand owners and demand for recycled content on caps. Any thoughts there?
Absolutely. So at one of my previous slides, we were able to include recycled content in caps and closures in the beverage industry. So I am starting to see that pull, and we are working with customers who are very interested in. Last year's Caps and Closures conference, we announced that we were able to achieve 100% recycled content in a beverage closure, and we received a lot of calls and contacts from brand owners who are interested in qualifying recycled content in their beverage closures as well. But definitely a lot of interest and pull there. And it's about getting the clean material, getting the right source, getting through all the organoleptic properties that you need to test through for beverage caps and closures. But it's all about matching the right material and using the right technology so that we can include recycled content in caps and closures.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Oh, you want me? So from my end, I agree. We have a big desire to incorporate recycled content into our packages, but then again, we rely on, our suppliers and the technology to really deliver, the technology that will meet our specifications and be within certain cost structure that we can afford. We know there's a cost to sustainability, so we're fully aware of that, but we need to make it into, within a reasonable thing that still makes business sense for us. And also it's important that we can start thinking about how do we create value, but not just add cost, but what's the value that, bringing recycled content into us packages can bring as well. So it's a different, point of view. And just to wrap it up, we fully support the How to Recycle effort. So we think that's a really good way to start creating consumer awareness and start getting that, people to dispose in the right way and get more of the minimum quantities needed to push for the recycle stream even in a bigger way. So.
Okay. Well, thank you. So for the next question, I'll set up a little bit of a personal anecdote. I was in the backyard sharing a beverage with my neighbor on a nice and warm Chicago night, and the talk of recycling came up, and he thinks very little of what he puts in his recycle bin ends up actually getting recycled. Now, I was obviously pushing back on him. But in Sandeep, maybe I'll start with you. What do you think are some of the biggest misperceptions about recycling outside the recycling industry?
You mean as far as the consumer is concerned?
Yeah.
End user. I think a lot of it is really related to education and getting down to educate people what is recyclable, what's not. I think one of the big points of confusion has been the whole resin identification code system. I think you and I think everybody on this panel recognizes that's not that cannot be called as a recycling code. But I think the common consumer still, I think, confused when they see those chasing arrows. They believe that the bottle or the package is recyclable, even though it may be made out of, let's say, polystyrene or a number 7 plastic, which may not be recyclable in a given area. So I think creating that education and clear messaging around what is recyclable, what's not. I think that's where something like the How to Recycle label from the SPC comes in. I think so. Companies are starting to do a great job of putting that logo to educate consumers on what can be recycled, what cannot be. But I think that's one big key is creating the right messaging, making sure the right materials go in the right recycle stream. Of course, I think to some extent, we still have a long way to go in terms of driving higher levels of recycling. As you know, with PET, we are only around 30% or so in the US, and PET is one of the most recyclable materials. So I think there's a lot that needs to go into collection and sorting and so on. But I think overall, I really feel the creating right messaging and educating consumers will go a long way in increasing the amount of recycled materials.
Okay.
I'd like to comment on that. I completely agree with you, Sandeep. I think, not only it's like the recycling symbols or the material identification symbols confusing, but I think it's also the fact that there's no harmonization in the infrastructure. It's very at the local level, what happens with your waste. And I think because people don't understand and know what's happening in their community, and they hear a different thing from other communities, this skepticism starts being created. It's almost like conspiracy theory. Why should I do this if it's not going to get recycled anyway? So I agree that education, it's really, really important. As well as, I think one other thing is like, it's inconvenient, right? Even the how to recycle is a great way to educate consumers, but not all consumers are going to pull all, say, their recyclable bags and take them to the supermarket. So if somehow you could find a way to not only educate, but make it convenient and easy for consumers to dispose of, I think that would go a long way.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I would just add that I think it's our responsibility as an industry to make it easier for consumers to recycle and reduce that confusion. I think education will only get you so far if we don't make it convenient and easy for consumers. So that's designing with recyclable materials in mind, make it easy to disassemble, or not even having to disassemble a product at all, make everything out of the same material when possible, so it's fully recyclable. Try to reduce the amount of confusion around mixed plastics. It is very confusing to consumers, and I think it is partially our responsibility to make it a lot easier, both from a design perspective with MRF technology improvement and with labeling.
Well, thanks everyone. That was intriguing. So as we look globally in terms of what recycling is happening, obviously we hear about Europe, and I was blessed to have lived over in Germany, and Saturday morning recycling was a social event I look forward to, and we know the impact with China that's had on the recycled markets, etc. And Paula, I'll start with you. Globally, what region or country or organization do you think will be leading managing post-consumer plastics by 2025, and why?
So, I'll let the experts in recycling comment later, but from a brand owner's perspective, what we see right now, like the consumers, like you were mentioning in Europe, are far more advanced, and infrastructure is more advanced when it comes to circular economy of plastic, especially in the bottle-to-bottle area. I think the US is more advanced on, downcycling when it comes to use post-consumer recycle or recycle material into durable goods or other, right? So I feel like if the current infrastructure does not change, there's no reason why we would think that would change, right? But as we see other technologies and future developments, I mentioned chemical recycling, but it could be, sorting of mixed streams, technologies, others, this may change. But I guess we need to wait and see where those technologies are advancing the most and what's coming up in the pipeline.
Okay.
Yeah, and I definitely agree that I think from a holistic plastic perspective and consumers' perspective, Europe is leading the way. But when it comes specifically to caps and closures, the US actually has better technology to process the polypropylene and HDPE required to a state that has been able to achieve FDA letter of non-object. And the FDA has also been more friendly towards providing these letter of non-objects for these materials, whereas EFSA currently doesn't allow a lot of these materials to be used in beverage closures specifically. So as we look at one of the largest markets for caps and closures, which is the food and beverage industry, the US actually has more closures with recycled content qualified in them than Europe does, which was really surprising to me because we always think of Europe as leading the way in recycling, which I do agree that from a consumer perception they are more likely to recycle. But from a technology perspective, the US is actually stepped ahead.
So one thing I'll add is what I see is, from my perspective, is also the collection or availability of collection for recycled materials in general. I think Europe has, obviously, like you said, Roger, that it's sort of part of the DNA there to recycle, and it's been going on for generations. I think in the US, there's still several regions that do not necessarily have access to recycling. And I think that's where organizations such as the Recycling Partnership, I think, do a great job of providing that access. So some of the work that the Recycling Partnership has done has gone a long way to increase that access, provide new bins, larger size bins to communities so they can collect more and start recycling more. So I think increasing that access will go a long way towards driving more recycling.
Okay. Well, thank you. It'll be fun to see how it evolves. It'd be great to see competition between the countries and regions, but it will play out. So Allison, here's a question for you. What would you like to see retailers and brand owners do to help with recycling?
Sure. So I think we're at a different stage than what I've seen in the past decade with embracing recycled content. And that's what I would really like to see. I would love to see brand owners really embrace and celebrate that they're using recycled content. Brands should be proud that they're using this recycled material and show it off. A lot of times we focus a lot on trying to make recycled content look like virgin material. So we look for clear or white material. And that means a lot of other recycled content gets included. But if you're going to use recycled content, get credit for it. So don't try to make it look like virgin, market it, and market the fact that it is recycled content and get the consumer credit for it. I've seen some of brands do this very successfully. Samsonite recently launched a luggage made out of ocean plastics, and it's this green-gray, and they purposely left it that color to celebrate that it's using recycled content. Herbal Essence also has a bottle made out of ocean plastics, and it's the only Herbal Essence bottle that's a darker gray color, again, to embrace the fact that they're using recycled content. So we are seeing the shift where brand owners are, stopping trying to make recycled content look just like virgin and really use it, own it, and celebrate that you're using recycled content.
That's powerful. Paula, speaking of power?
I'm not sure we're doing that yet, but what I can tell you is that we're definitely increasing our capabilities to increase the recycled content in our materials. We have marketing, understanding and embracing that sustainability, including recycled content, recycling, all that needs to be part of their transformation portfolios. So we've taken this beyond just, packaging. It's really something that the organization is starting to understand and put in their plans. And I think you're going to see, much more things coming out the pipeline from us. I'm not really sure we are going to, publicize it or not, but we're definitely doing it for sustainability reasons. So.
Oh, thank you. Well, for the next question, this one isn't on the list. So what is your perspective, what COVID-19 will do with recycling? And why don't I start with Sandeep?
Okay, I think it is definitely going to have, a short-term dampening effect. Especially for small recyclers. I know they operate on a fairly small margins, and they have normally, even in the best of conditions, it's a little bit of a struggle for them to survive in that market. So I think in the short term, I believe we will see some downturn in the recycling industry, particularly in the United States. But again, given I think all the mention we made about corporation goals and commitments with sustainability, as well as companies participating in the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and other global initiatives, I think long term, I definitely see a bright future for recycling, because I think as the demand for recycled material grows, as companies start really incorporating higher and higher levels of recycled content in their packaging, that should provide a boost to the recycling industry overall. So I think it's something that it'll be maybe a pain that that they'll have to endure in the short term, but I think that the long-term prospects, I definitely believe, look very good. I'll maybe let Paula comment the way she sees it from a brand owner standpoint.
Yeah, I don't know what it will be for recycling. I can tell you, like, what we see is like an increased need for meeting food safety and hygiene requirements. So it'll be interesting to see if that has an impact, say, in post-consumer recycled content. I think that's quite a stretch. I don't think so, but that could be one. The other is the explosion of e-commerce. I know it was mentioned before, but I think we're going to see more and more e-commerce, and we are working also to make sure that whatever we are designing for e-commerce, from the boxes to potentially the primary pack, that they not only are complying with e-commerce requirements, but that they are also using the most sustainable approaches, whether it's through the material or the use of space, the shipping, and so forth. I'm guessing for caps and closures, I think it's a huge opportunity for designing the right thing for a space that's going to grow quite a bit. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with Paula on the e-commerce and the focus on e-commerce as more and more people are ordering things from home versus going to the store. And that I think that also brings a focus on at-home curbside recycling versus schemes that require consumers to take something back to the store. I mean, there were very few consumers who were willing to do that before COVID-19, and now that people aren't going to the store as much, there's less material getting recycled at the take back to store programs. So I really think us as an industry, again, need to figure out how to improve at-home curbside recycling, make it really easy for consumers to do that. And COVID-19 has increased the importance of that route of recycling.
Okay, well, thank you. And I'll probably put an ad on that in terms of speaking with recyclers, as they love clean streams that come from businesses in commercial areas, and they tend to get more contamination, have to do more work sorting with homeowners. You're talking about e-commerce and COVID kind of shifting more of that. Do you think this is temporary, or do you think this will actually be more of a permanent trend, that you'll see more diverse streams from homes going to recyclers than businesses?
I think we'll see more of that. I don't see going back to where we were prior to COVID. I don't know if it will be at the extent we're now because we're homebound, but I think the more people adapt e-commerce in their lives, the more comfortable they feel with it. And, the more, I don't think, we'll go back to where we were.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I agree. I think we're seeing that more and more recycled materials are coming from the domestic streams. As I think all of us agree that e-commerce is the way that's going to be, I think, the future. So again, I think handling or being able to collect those on a residential level is really going to be critical moving forward.
Okay, the next question kind of builds on this. So we talked about the Ellen MacArthur commitments, 2025, and we know that plastics recycling is, I think, below 10%. What is the biggest change you expect to see in the next 5 years with recycling overall, especially of recycling of plastics, to help hit those commitments? And Allison.
Yeah, sure. I do think, again, there's going to be a lot of improvements to enable consumers to recycle more at home, whether that's being able to take mixed plastics into chemical recycling or improvements at MRFs so that there can be better sorting. I love all the partnerships in terms of bringing robotics and technology into MRFs so that you can take more materials, and some of the initiatives with the MRF of the future so that flexibles can get recycled at the MRF level. So I think there is going to be a focus on getting more plastics into the recycling stream and having it be able to be sorted, processed, and used in clean feedstock so it does have a circular life.
Okay. Sandeep, your perspective?
So I see design for recycling really taking on a front and center role. I think, as you know, with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation commitments, I think most of the large brand owners have committed to making 100% of their packaging fully recyclable, or at least a combination of recyclable and compostable. So making a packaging fully recyclable will need to be high on their list in terms of making sure there's no disruptors such as shrink labels and the right kind of adhesives are being used and so on. So I think I see that becoming a key focus moving forward, making sure that everything they're putting out into the market is fully recyclable given the current infrastructure and the current recycling type of processes.
Okay. Paula, you want to add anything or?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, from a brand owner, we're not just going to be limited ourselves to, our own design for recyclability, but I think you're going to see more and more partnerships or collaboration with the whole supply chain, right? With the waste management companies. I think we're going to see a lot of experimentation and diversification on infrastructure, material developments, and hopefully new model incentives to promote a change in consumer behavior. Hopefully more investment in education as well.
Well, thank you. Well, the next question here, and I'll give a little context, as I speak with different recyclers, and they hear about all these brand owner initiatives, commitments. For lack of a better word, they're a little cynical. And so from your perspective, what technologies or new improvements do you think are overhyped or will make a difference? And Sandeep, I'll start with you.
Okay, so the one area I think I believe holds the most promise and also the most hype, in a sense, right now is chemical recycling. I mean, I'm by no means am I putting down chemical recycling. I definitely believe there are some really good technologies or companies that are going to come out of it. But I think at the moment it's almost, I like to call it the Wild West, because there's a lot of companies in that field that are touting their technologies, and essentially they make it seem like you can just throw anything at it and they'll be able to process using chemical recycling. I think when it comes down to it, there will be a select number of companies that will really come out of this, that will be economically viable, that have processes that are able to handle a fairly wide range of materials, for a wide range of plastics. So I think I see chemical recycling maybe not as the magic bullet or sort of a panacea, but I think it definitely has a place, and it will be find a place in the future to recycle some things that maybe are not ideal for mechanical recycling. And but I think overall things that plastics or packaging that can be recycled using mechanical recycling will continue to go that route. But that's sort of where I see the future with chemical recycling.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you, Sandeep. I think chemical recycling is not the silver magic bullet, although it will have a major component to play. So I don't want people to wait for chemical recycling. We still need to focus on improving mechanical recycling and also looking at what can we do with the current materials that we have. Paula mentioned cost, and there's technology. I think one of the later speakers from Influx, looking at technologies like Influx so that we can look at how can we use the recycled materials that we have today, as well as how can we get creative with the virgin material so that we aren't passing on large costs to the brand owners so that they can have recycled content. I do think we have a lot of those technologies today. We have a lot of material today, and we shouldn't wait for a chemical recycling. We can use what we have today to start making a difference.
Well, thank you. So here's another broader social question. What actions or roles would you expect or you'd like to see government organizations make with recycling of plastics? Allison?
Sure. So I think, it's looking at how can we make recycling more cost efficient and more accessible to the consumer. As Paula mentioned, it's very piecemeal today, county by county. It's very different. And I do think there needs to be some legislation to look at the cost of landfills compared to the cost of recycling, and really accounting for the true cost of landfills as we're making the value proposition for recycling. And without that, it's going to be cost inefficient to recycle in multiple areas if you're not taking into account the true cost of landfills. So I really think they can do a lot of work there in making recycling more convenient and accessible for consumers.
Yeah, I'll jump and say that I believe that the government could establish policy frameworks that have a holistic support of interconnected responsibilities between brand owners, waste management, companies, and consumers. I think comprehensive regulatory solutions that address the roles of each stakeholder must be in place to drive packaging waste solutions. I mean, things like deposit schemes and stuff, they should be a joint effort between government, brand owners, and waste management. And those are policies that I think, if you incentivize and it's transparent and it's a fair share for everyone, I think, that would be a great thing. So.
Thanks. Sandeep, any thoughts?
I think, I agree with Allison, Paula. I guess, I was at PepsiCo. We definitely were supporting certain APR or extended producer responsibility initiatives, because I think we could see them driving more recycling and also more recycled content. So I think, again, the right kind of APR and incentives, I think, will go a long way. And as you can see in Europe, in the EU, they have a minimum recycled content target that they I think planning to work towards. So something like that, I think, would definitely go a long way coming from a regulatory standpoint.
Yeah, but with the recycled content requirements, we got to make sure that there's recycled material available to provide that content, right? So I think it's a chicken and an egg, and as Paula said, it's fully integrated. We have to have policies that make it easy to get more recycled content and for consumers to recycle more, because otherwise, you can put all the mandates you want for recycled content. There's not going to be.
Great. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. So here's the last question, then I'll give you each a chance for some closing thoughts. Now imagine that you have a few million or a few $1 billion, and it has to be directed towards something with recycling or end of life with packaging, to invest either in private industry or government. Where would each of you put that money? Who wants to start? Sandeep.
Well, I think my focus would be really driving more food content or food grade materials. So things like high density polyethylene, polypropylene, and being able to create more supply of food grade recycled plastics is where I would put my money, because I really see definitely a growing demand for that as more brand owners want to put more of that into their packaging. So that would be my bet.
Okay. Paula.
That's a really hard one, Roger. I don't know.
Getting $1 billion is hard too.
Yeah, my own money, I don't know. But I mean, if I could dream big, I think probably I would look at what are those new business models or new ways that I can embrace all these different materials, technologies, including reuse schemes, right? To add value. So it's not like a one-to-one change of what we currently have, but how can I connect, what the future looks like, and how can I gather all these, opportunities to create value for consumers so that it's not, just an additional cost, but it's something that they really want. And could be an example where we start making durable goods with amazing caps and closures that can be reused and are somehow interconnected or something, provide incentives for consumers to reuse those, and they get some, discounts or things like that. So how do we create value for the waste? That's, I guess, what I'm saying.
Thank you. Allison.
And I love that Paula brought up reuse, because we haven't talked about that scheme as much, but if there's a way for reuse to intersect with recyclable, I think that is a great area to be in, so that we can drive reuse of products and reduce the amount of materials we need to produce and still be able to recycle it at the back end. Then we'll really have a more sustainable solution for the consumers. But similar to what Sandeep mentioned, I really do think to increase recycling rates and recycled content that's available, I would love to invest in consumer availability and make recycling really available for consumers, and also improve technologies at MERS so that they can separate easier, they can separate more efficiently, they can process more materials, and process those into higher end and markets like FDA or food grade materials.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you. And as I just mentioned, at the end of the questions, and I will give each of you a chance for a little bit of a closing commentary. And Sandeep, can we start with you?
Sure. I was going to defer it to the ladies, but if you want me to start with that. Yeah, I think, again, the way I see it is we are in a little bit of a tough spot right now with COVID-19, but long term, I definitely see a bright future for both recycling and recycled materials in general, but overall sustainable packaging, because I think the world is waking up to the fact that the recovery or the growth out of this situation will need to be a more sustainable or a green one. So I definitely am very bullish about the future in terms of where sustainable packaging is heading. And I think that's going to provide an incentive to the overall industry, to the recycling operations, and overall to the incorporation of more recycled material. And I think caps and closures definitely will sort of go in line with the rest of the packaging. And as Allison said, their company already has a closure with 100% recycled content. I think we'll see more of those, and similar to the bottle where we have 100% recycled PET bottles. I think the recycled content in closures is also going to keep on increasing. And so I think that should really help drive higher and higher recycling rates. So that's sort of my, I guess, prognostication of or the future, where I see the future headed if I have to look into a crystal ball.
Okay, well, thank you, Sandeep. Paula, would you like to share?
Sure. So first, I would just reiterate that Mars truly is committed, to make a change and really incorporate sustainability packaging into our organization, all the way from organizational changes to create more capabilities, to working with our internal counterparts, cross functions, marketing, and so forth. So again, I'm just reiterating that. And what excites me is we are recognizing that by us doing it alone, we're not going to move the needle. We do our part. But what's exciting is starting to partner with, the other parts of the industry that are fundamental for change. And I think we're getting out of our silos and taking more holistic approach and actually taking actions and executing with our partners. So that's very exciting. And I think that maybe finally can move the needle, right? So.
Okay, well, thank you. Allison.
Yeah, and Paula, that was actually the topic I had in the last Caps and Closures I went to, how we need to collaboratively work as a supply web versus a linear supply chain to be able to really drive sustainability. And like Sandeep, I'm very bullish on caps and closures specifically. There's been a lot of focus on the bottles in the past, but now is the time for caps and closures. We are seeing brand owners start to qualify and launch products with recycled content in caps and closures. And we have technology now to do that. We don't have to wait for technologies that are coming further down the pipeline. We have technologies now to look at designing the mold, using the right hot runner to moderate temperature, looking at the pressure through the molding process so that we can account for the properties of recycled content, looking at reuse models. We have the technology now, and now there's a bigger focus on caps and closures. So I really think this is our time. This is our time to be more sustainable as an industry. This is our time to be more sustainable for caps and closures specifically, and start driving some of that change in the caps and closure space.
Well, thank you. Some final comments for me. I've had a number of my peers in the industry ask, how are people going to hit those amazing goals that 100% recoverable, recyclable, or compostable? And it is very challenging, but I've never seen in all my years everyone coalesce around a goal, and there'll be a lot more progress made because of this. And when you have CEOs making public announcements, that really puts the weight of the organization and the industry behind it. So on that now, I'll say back to Joe for some final remarks.
Great. Thanks, Roger. As Roger said, our time is up for today. This is a topic we could talk about for several hours. I think there's so much to it, and we covered a lot of ground in this hour, though. And I think we all learned a lot, and all a lot to think about and talk about in the future coming up, and a lot going on in the industry. I want to thank our fine panelists today, Paula Appendini, Sandeep Kulkarni, and Allison Lin, for sharing with us their insights into sustainable packaging and some of the advances and initiatives that need to be done to move the needle, as was mentioned a few times in the conversation. And special thanks to Roger Zellner of Rogue Zebra Consulting and Coaching for leading this great discussion. If you want to revisit the session, it, along with others from the conference, will be available on the Plastics News website after the conference is completed. We'll also send a link to download some of the presentations from the event that speakers have agreed to share. I want to remind you to tune in to our final session for today at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, where we'll hear from Bimal Lakocha, Director of Packaging R&D at the Coca-Cola Company. We have many other sessions planned over the next 3 days. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.